February 21st, 2025. It's 10:35 a.m. right now. I believe we're on the schedule from 10:30 to 11:30. This is a work session regarding briefing from municipality, federal lobbyist, BlankRome, government relations. We'll start with introductions in the room. Mr. Perez-Verdillo.
Cameron Perez-Verdillo.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant. On the phone, we have Member Bronga.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. Member Salt.
Randy Salt's here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Thank you. Also, I believe from the mayor's office, we have Nolan Clauda. Are you there, Nolan?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am here.
All
Sorry.
right, thank you. And then on behalf of BlankRome, who do we have on the phone?
Okay, I'll start. This is Don Norton of BlankRome, and could my colleagues also introduce yourselves?
Hi, this is CJ Zane with BlankRome Government Relations.
Hi, I'm Joan
Katie
Bondra
Tatchell.
with BlankRome.
So Joan, what was your last name?
Bondaref.
All right, and then Katie.
Katie Tatchell with BlankRome.
Anyone else from BlankRome?
Okay,
And
well,
Dave Jansen. Yep,
And
for
who?
BlankRome.
What was your last name? Jansen?
Dave Jansen.
Dave Jansen. So just because we have you all at a distance, I'm going to ask when you go to speak, make sure you say your name so the record knows who is speaking. I generally will keep the queue a little trickier when we have so many people participating from far away, but that's okay. I assume, Don, before you get started, you'll have the mic, but Anna Brawley wanted to speak briefly. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, we're eager to hear kind of what's happening at the federal level. I just want to remind folks, those that we have a legislative committee, and I know our lobbyists have participated in that some, but this is also a requirement to give an annual briefing to the assembly. So this is why this is a work session. And I just want to also ask our BlankRome folks, I know we have an hour, but I imagine people will have questions, and obviously there's a lot happening. So I want to make sure that we stay focused on kind of things that impact the municipality and the port, and also just reminding, that we are a nonpartisan organization. And so we don't want to get, I know it's difficult to avoid getting into the politics, but I just want to say that again, because I want to be clear since we're on the public record. Thank you.
All right, so Don.
yeah, this is Don Norton of BlankRome. Yes, thank you, Anna, and we are totally in agreement with exactly what you said. First of all, thank you for having us. Our last presentation was in person last August, and hopefully next August, when we're usually in Anchorage, we can make the presentation in person. So thank you for letting us do this by phone. I'd like to refer you to the agenda that I provided Jennifer, and it was provided to you. But what I'd like to propose here, I will just very quickly go through these topics, and please hold your questions until the end, because I think it's very important that we spend the majority of our time, as Anna suggested. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear what's on your mind. We want to hear your concerns. There's a lot going on here right now in Washington, D.C. So with that, I just like to get started. Oh, also, I should mention that we routinely submit written monthly reports, and just a few days ago, I submitted a monthly report which covers many of these topics in more detail. It goes to Jennifer, and then Jennifer distributes it from there. Item number 2, we could spend all day on this one, the Trump executive orders. Lots going on, as you know from the news. Our firm had a webinar earlier this week on issues arising from the DEI issues in the executive orders. That took a full hour, so we don't want to get bogged down here on all the details. there was a specific executive order on Alaska energy issues, and in various ways, Alaska energy issues are getting a lot of attention from the Trump administration. Beyond that, I just note, as noted on the agenda, we have a continuously updated tracker that tracks all the executive orders and the presidential nominations with a little summary, etc. If you're not familiar with that, you would like to have access to that, I can send links to Jennifer at the conclusion of this. Item number 2, congressional activity. FY25 annual appropriations. The fiscal year started 5 months ago. We don't have a budget yet. Meanwhile, things are in limbo. There's not a what's called a top line agreement on the FY25 spending, meaning the difference, the total amount of appropriations and how you split it between defense and non-defense. It leaves a lot in limbo, and as I noted, the AWW earmarks, which total about $11 million, which are pending in the bills, the HUD continuum of care funds, transportation grant funds, very important for the port, etc. The March 14th is when the temporary spending authority expires, and we'll see what happens. There'll be a federal government shutdown or another temporary extension. But so far, unlike the pace of the Trump administration, the pace of the Congress, other than the Senate confirming nominations, the pace of the Congress on these annual appropriations issues has been, well, as slow as molasses in January. Meanwhile, FY26 annual appropriations, they should be starting that process because they haven't finished last year's budget, which is 5 months overdue. They haven't started what they should be doing on the coming year's budget. I note on the agenda, Senator Murkowski has an earmark deadline of February 28th. Earlier, that was February 14th. She did extend that by 2 weeks. So we don't, since you already extended it by 2 weeks, we don't expect further extensions. But be mindful of that because once the deadline is final, and they literally get thousands of earmark requests from Alaskans. So be sure to get whatever you want on behalf of the MOA and the POA submitted in a timely manner. This next item, this is going to sound a bit wonky, but you may have seen on the news this morning, the Senate passed a budget. What the Senate passed it's called a budget resolution, and I underline that on the agenda. Resolution is separate from the appropriations bills. A budget resolution is simply an overall blueprint that has dollar amounts and instructions that go to the various committees of Congress of what they should do to either cut spending or cut taxes or raise taxes, etc. All those individual committees of Congress then report back, and all those pieces of the bill are put together in what's called a budget reconciliation bill. Notice I underlined the word reconciliation. Now, normally, the word reconciliation means, like the couple had problems, but they have reconciled the reconciliation. Normally, reconciliation implies harmony and coming together. In the case of Congress, I'm afraid the word reconciliation is more like controversy and disagreements. But that process for the budget resolution is just underway. The House needs to act, but the real action will be in this follow-up budget reconciliation bill. That's where they will be making the decision: do we cut statutory programs affecting Medicaid? Do we cut statutory programs affecting HUD housing grants, etc.? Those follow-up bills will be where the rubber really hits the road there. So that's what, when that process starts, we'll really be needing to pay attention to all kinds of things. Item number 5. This has barely gotten underway. The House has held a few hearings. and it'll be a 2-year process, but this is a very important bill. The Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. It's a major multi-year bill. It affects transportation funding, everything except aviation, basically. It's the successor to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. That law, that was passed during the Biden presidency, expires October 1st, 2026. So Congress is beginning its reauthorization process now. How that'll turn out affects the amount of money for roads, for public transit, ports somewhat, but it's a very big bill. So we'll want to be, as this process evolves, we'll want to be paying special attention to it. It's a biggie. Item number 6, I just note some various things. You're probably familiar that the Port of Alaska recently got a $50 million merit grant. That was in December, actually, and a $1.9 million EPA grant for port for planning and preliminary costs for port electrification. Because that $1.9 million was from EPA and was under a program in the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, we had concerns that those funds might be targeted by the incoming administration. In fact, in the case of another Alaska entity, they had a grant from that same category, and all at once things went dark, and we weren't sure what was going on. But that did get resolved. They are able to draw funds once again. So whatever the problem was, that did get resolved. But I do want to mention, if you hear problems of for any reason, or you don't know the reason of routine grant processing being delayed, please let us know, because the Alaska delegation really wants to know if there's problems in existing allocated money not going to Alaska. 6C, 3 recent good pieces of news for the Port of Alaska on merit determinations. As I noted, Joan Bondaroff, by the way, Bondaroff on the call is a former chief counsel of Marriott and can talk to those sorts of issues all day if you want. The good news, bad news, 6D, we're aware that the Marriott lawsuit, the funds were cut to $11.3 million. There was a motion filed for rehearing in bank. Our firm does not handle that. That's handled by a separate firm here in DC that specializes in federal contracts. I have not heard if there's been any action on the motion for rehearing yet, but normally the odds are long on that. 6E, future federal grant openings. Normally, in any call or report I have a list of here's currently open federal grant opportunities and here's what's going to open soon. Simply because we haven't changed administrations and there's a lot of reviews going on. At the moment, there's just really nothing open, and we're waiting to see what the new administration will do in terms of grants and grant conditions, and also what Congress will do on the pending FY appropriations bill under item number 3. Will they be cutting the federal grant pots, or will the size of the federal grant pot survive? We just don't know yet. Things are very, very fluid at the moment. With that, if any of my colleagues from BlankRome would like to add a comment here or there, please do so. Otherwise, I think we should get to questions and answers, because like I said, we really want to hear your concerns and your questions. But anybody else from BlankRome want to add a comment?
This is CJ. I just want to add, this is CJ Zane with BlankRome Government Relations for the record. I just want to add, Don, I thought you did a great job going through that agenda, an excellent summary. I just wanted to add that going back to item number 3, Don was talking about the FY25 bills that are still pending, including earmarks or congressionally directed spending that would benefit the muni and the port that are in those unresolved bills. Don mentioned two outcomes, and I know he meant to mention the third one. The two that he mentioned are that we could end up with a government shutdown come March 14th, and or we could end up with a short shutdown and then another continuing resolution, which is what we're operating under now. That continuing resolution, if there is another one, is probably going to carry out to the end of the fiscal year. But the third possibility, and I think this is somewhat remote, but still possible, the third possibility is that an FY25 omnibus consolidated appropriations bill could still get done, in which case there's a decent chance, if that happens, that earmarks that have already been included in those bills would survive and go through the process. So it's any one of those three for FY25. So I just wanted to clarify that and to reemphasize Don's point that while all of that is still unresolved as to FY25, the budget reconciliation process that Don talked about is ongoing, and very soon they have to start the FY26 appropriations process as well. So there is a lot going on, and I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that there's still a possibility the FY25 appropriations could get done as an omnibus bill, but we won't know that until we get closer to March 14th. Thank you.
Don, it's Joan Bondreth from BlankRome Government Relations. I was just watching the amendment process on the budget reconciliation bills, and I thought it was interesting, and maybe the Assembly would like to know about this. Senator Murkowski joined a Democrat amendment to vote to reinstate federal employees who were recently hired from the Park Service, the Forest Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and BLM. The amendment failed by a vote of 48 to 52, but it indicates Senator Murkowski's support for all of those federal employees in the state of Alaska. And at the same time, Senator Sullivan also backed an amendment from a Democrat senator that would have supported federal wildland firefighters by ensuring fair wages and adequate services for their health and well-being. That too was rejected by a close vote of 48 to 52. So you can see where the fault lines lie in the Congress right now between supporting some of the Trump administration cuts and trying to restore them for constituents who need them restored. So just thought I would bring that up. Thank you.
And Don, this is Genevieve. I just wanted to, and not to harp on appropriations, but just a reminder, I know Don said that the Murkowski deadline had been pushed until the 28th, which is accurate. But since the Muni did have requests in FY25, just a reminder that Murkowski's office is suggesting that even if it is in FY25 to resubmit it. And then you can note within the CDS request itself that it was included in FY25. Wanted to flag that.
Okay, so.
Don, I think we're back to questions.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see HUD on here anywhere. I just want to continue to raise this conversation. Oh, I see. It is under create. I'm sorry, I didn't see that line there. I'm curious what work you've done with Senator Sullivan's office on that topic. It's ongoing. We're coming down in March. And I just sent to Senator Sullivan's team that there's a congressman out of California, Peters, who apparently has been working on this as well for a number of years, actually. And so I'm still trying to coalition build, and Senator Sullivan believes he has some in with the HUD secretary. So I think we need to continue pursuing that a little bit more substantively than a simple one-line analysis. So I just want to know if there's anything going on that topic, and if not, how do we prioritize it?
We here haven't done anything new recently, nor have we been asked to, but we're always glad to help, as you know. The immediate news is on these continuum of care funds. Both the House and Senate bill from last year had very identical numbers, but I don't know if that's going to hold with the new Congress. But certainly, yeah, we're always glad to help. While we're primarily focused on the port issues, that's our gig. But we're always glad to help in anything in Washington D.C. So just let us know.
All right, I think that I will
on
dig up,
that,
I'll dig up our
CJ
resolution that we passed on the topic and had discussed with you guys last year and the year before. So I'll go ahead and make sure we get that entire suite sent back to you, so you know that it is a strong municipal priority to address this concern as we continue to miss out on probably tens of millions of dollars annually if we look at the formula, and recognize that Alaska continues to be shortchanged in a very meaningful way. And so, but I guess we'll again prepare a communication back to you about all of the things that we've been tackling. So, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. I have a few different questions, but so I'll just ask a couple and I can get back in the queue if others have questions. But I'll also say, so we were just down in Juneau, myself and Member Rivera and Mr. Clouda from the mayor's office for the Alaska Municipal League conference. And of course, the state issues are their own deal right now. But I think where all of these intersect is really local governments have shared a lot of concern about project delays. A lot of them have projects that are with some of these funding sources that were paused. And so just to say, the Alaska Municipal League has been communicating with Murkowski's office in particular, who asked for kind of what those impacts are. And Anchorage does not have so many of those, but just to say that's kind of what's happening with local governments generally, and just that real concern about project delays. Another one that's been shared, since you mentioned the federal workers, part of the reason Murkowski has been active on that is there's a lot of concern about wildfire season. There's almost no snow on the ground, and that is an issue not just in the interior, not just in very wild places, but also next to our neighborhoods. And so just to say that is a serious concern that I think our federal lobbyists should be aware of and talking about, because we don't have enough firefighters in the state. And to the extent that we rely on those federal wildfire staff or firefighting staff. So those are the things that are being talked about right now. And that's where they intersect with Anchorage. So my questions though are on energy projects. And so another thing just to share, Representative Fields gave us a letter. I'm getting a PDF copy of it. Several legislators wrote to the congressional delegation about permitting, really just how to cut red tape with permitting delays. So that's something to be aware of. But I wonder if there's any, if you know of any kind of legislation right now. I know there was the Port Act related to permitting, and then kind of along those same lines with energy, there's a number of kind of renewable energy projects. We have a governor who's very strongly in support of renewable energy, all of the above. And we have a president who is not. And so just wondering if there's been any kind of discussion or movement on that focus on renewable, because I think it's going to impact Alaska a lot, but it's also going to impact the city, because we're trying to figure out replacing or supplementing natural gas. There's a lot of projects that are in churn right now, and we're looking at our own renewable projects over the years. So anyway, that's kind of the big picture, but wondering about permitting and energy.
This is Joan Bondurant. I'll take a stab at some of it, and I know others will join. On permitting reform, there continues to be attempts at legislation to expedite permits. I know the Army Corps of Engineers put out a list recently with the major projects that they have responsibility for which they are going to expedite permitting, and it's possible some of them could intersect and affect Alaska. And just yesterday, the Council on Environmental Quality issued an immediate Federal Register notice. Sorry, I'm struggling with IFR on they are going to repeal all of the existing NEPA regulations and replace them with guidance in an attempt to expedite the environmental review process. And we're just taking a look at that to see where that's going to go. But that would be one aspect of how, permitting could be expedited, because often it's the NEPA process that takes the longest in finishing these projects. On renewable energy, I think you're absolutely correct. This administration is not as supportive of renewable energy as the prior administration. And I don't think we know exactly where it's going. In his testimony, his confirmation hearing, Doug Burgum, who's the new Secretary of Interior, made it clear that the administration position is less favored for renewable energy. He said that the country needs more baseline forms of energy, which he considers oil and gas. So that seems to be the official policy. And I haven't seen that much political action, opposing that or tilting in the other direction, although certainly there are some members of Congress who are more interested in renewable energy. And as it turns out, North Dakota itself was a big producer of onshore wind, and that came up in his confirmation hearings. So that whole issue, I'm afraid, is in limbo at the moment. That's what I know at the moment about those two issues.
Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off what Joan said and just say that
Genevieve,
I think. Yeah.
Can you identify yourself for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Genevieve Cowan. Just to piggyback off what Joan was saying, yes, it is clear that this administration is not as open to renewables as the last one. However, they have in the EO that came out, the Unleashing American Energy, there are some, well, at least one type. So I know I've worked on hydro projects in Alaska before. So I think learning a bit more about the types of projects you're thinking of implementing would help us be able to market them better or help you out in more specific ways. Just so.
This is CJ Zane with BlankRome. I don't think that all of us necessarily have to speak to every question, and I will admonish myself in that direction as well. But I did want to respond quickly to the question about energy and about permit reform. In addition to what Joan and Genevieve have talked about, there is the possibility that permit reform and permit expediting could be part of the budget reconciliation process that we were talking about, particularly if the Congress is able to document for the Congressional Budget Office with the budgetary impact of streamlining the delivery of projects, for instance. So that's another avenue by which permit reform and project streamlining could occur, is in the budget reconciliation process itself. And on the energy and renewable energy side, I would just add to what my colleagues have said. It's somewhat uncertain, and the Trump administration has come out, and we've all seen it. In some cases, and I'm not being partisan, they have overstated or overreached, and that's kind of putting it mildly on some of these, and have had to walk them back a little bit. There's a lot that the courts are going to say. There's a lot that Congress is going to say before all this, settles out. And where it seems to be headed is in the direction of sort of all of the above, so that renewables are not left completely out of the picture, although they'll be de-emphasized by this administration. There are too many areas of the nation where you have red states and blue states, but there are many red states where renewable energy projects have already begun, and where grant funding agreements and loan guarantees have already been signed. So while there'll be a de-emphasis on renewable, I think that it's going to end up being, I think all of us at BlankRome feel that it's going to end up being more of a all of the above, which includes renewables, particularly some innovative stuff with regard to hydroelectric. And hydroelectric, of course, is very important in Alaska, at least in certain communities in Alaska. So, you know, it's just, it warrants keeping a close eye and watching how these things settle out. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And on those points, yeah, I mean, I think we agree. I think the conversation in Alaska and certainly in Anchorage has been all of the above, right? And so I just want to emphasize that. And then I think what we're also hearing is these are more kind of messages to carry. I think the specifics, that's a follow-up from Mr. Cava in the mayor's office to make sure that you guys are fully in the loop on what's happening and what we're doing. Specifically, as well as kind of what some of these other bigger state conversations are, because that's really what the most of our week was about. Specifically, you know, it to the extent that we're hearing, even from our own representative yesterday, is that we need to be less federally dependent. I think if we are supposed to be more independent from federal funds, then energy independence is a huge part of that. And the way to do that is with renewables. So I think that's really, that's one of the key connections we need to make in how we're talking about this, especially with people from other states, if that makes sense. And that definitely includes the municipality, because we are looking at running out of natural gas pretty soon, and at least easy natural gas. So it's a real conversation here right now. Thanks.
Karen, go ahead.
I believe your voice was kind of light, Chair Constant, but I believe you were asking about the HUD funding. And I was going to piggyback off that a little bit. I don't know if anybody's talking about this, but I'm wondering if there's been states that feel like there should be some compensation for what the Ninth Circuit Court did for the ruling on homeless abatement. And I was talking with a group of people last night about just how that allowed this window of it to become extremely more pervasive. And I'm not saying that we go around and criminalize, but that inability to keep parks clear went on for so long, it's going to be a very difficult lift to move that. And I don't know if there's any talk about that, but I do believe what we're dealing with is a FEMA-like problem that needs a FEMA-like response.
This is Sharon Bondreth. I'm generally familiar with the court decision, but I'd have to look at it again in order to advise you better about what the impact is for the municipalities. So I don't want to guess on the phone at the moment.
I was just going to clarify that they reversed the position, but there's a lot of damage that was done in the interim.
Yeah,
This
I
is Don Norton.
understand.
go ahead, Don.
Yeah, this is Don Norton at BlankRome. Karen, to answer your question, I haven't heard of any particular effort for getting compensation, as you say, but I will say that in the current environment, any new federal spending program is going to be really, really tough. I'm just reporting the news.
Yeah, and I think that the courts have immunity from such kind of claims, and the courts were just deciding based on the rules that they have. And so I don't know who's having those conversations. I think that there's an unlikely scenario in which any funds would come to pay back communities for a decision of the court. The court doesn't have that kind of operation. But we continue to face the issues, and we will continue, which is why we are definitely asking for help with the HUD continuum of care, because if we can address that, we can get ahead of the curve. So other members, Ms. Brawley, I think you also have yourself in the queue.
Yeah. One other question on a separate topic, and this is one where it doesn't so much affect our direct bottom line, but it certainly affects the community, and it affects other issues like homelessness, like all the other things we're doing, and that's Medicaid. I've heard a lot of rumbling that there is discussion about targeting the Medicaid expansion population. Right now there's a 90% federal match, the FMAP. And so there's discussion about reducing that, which would have massive implications for our state budget. It would either force cuts or it would force us to pick up probably hundreds of millions of dollars that we don't have right now. So I just want to share that's a state concern, but it does directly affect all of our ability to do treatment projects, supportive housing, all the things, because the expansion population is, it's a lot of folks, but it's single adults. And so that is also the folks who are living outside right now. And I've also, so I guess the question is just putting that on the radar as less direct impact to our budget, but impact to the community. And have you heard anything on that front around discussion of tribal FMAP? So the tribal folks get 100% federal match, which means it is not a state cost. And I don't know of any active discussion about that right now, but I just want you all to be aware, because that is a very serious implication if they start talking about changing that as well, but even just the expansion population. So I don't know if that's something you guys are tracking generally, or if you have any update on that.
This is Don Norton of BlankRome. On the issue of Medicaid expansion, some funds being taken back. Yeah, Alaska is not alone. I live across the river in Virginia, and that's a big issue there as well. Medicaid is already an expensive program for many states, and if they remove this extra federal funding, that would not be good. We don't know the answer if they will be touching that or not in the budget reconciliation bill. But Medicaid is a big, expensive federal program. The House Energy and Commerce Committee will be the first ones to make a decision on that one. If Medicaid cuts will be part of the budget reconciliation bill, and then if they are, what kind of cuts? Benefit cuts or payments to doctors, payments to hospitals, payments to nursing homes, etc. So that's an unknown, but yes, it's a biggie, and it also affects the state I live in too. On the tribal match issue, I'm afraid I don't know. Haven't heard anything on that. If anybody else is familiar with that.
Yeah, this is CJ Zane from BlankRome. I have a little information to add. On the Medicaid, what we've heard a lot about, and this is on the table, but it's too early to tell whether it gets into the budget reconciliation in some form or not. But it certainly is on the table for discussion with regard to budget reconciliation, and that is changes to, able-bodied work rules related to eligibility for Medicaid. I don't think we've heard that much. I mean, President Trump and his cabinet so far, and many members of Congress have said in the broad brush, Medicare and Medicaid are to be protected other than from around the edges, but those edges can be very important. And one of the edges, and it's obviously more than an edge, is the work-related, able-bodied work-related to eligibility for Medicaid, that they are looking at that's on the table. But I think Don Norton is exactly right. It's too early to tell how that might shake out. But that is something that they're looking at. Also on the tribal side, as it relates to provision of services and funding, but also across the board related to Native sovereignty and Native economic development. There is an effort for sure by the Alaska delegation and also other states, Republicans and Democrats from other states with substantial Native American populations to press forward to the Trump administration that tribal programs and tribal benefits are not to be confused from the point of view of those senators and congressmen from Alaska and other states that have sizable tribal populations and constituencies, that are not to be confused with efforts related to rolling back DEI and some of the other initiatives that were put in by executive order by the previous administration and that this administration is trying to repeal by executive order, sort of like the dueling executive orders situation, that those tribal programs are not to be lumped in with that and confused with that. And from the early signs, I believe progress is being made there, that you have Trump administration officials recognizing that programs for Native Americans are not race-based programs. They're political programs under the Constitution of the United States, the Commerce Clause, and all of the treaties and body of Native American law that has come since then. So that effort is really being made. And again, we have to see how well those tribal programs and prerogatives will be maintained. I think it's a very important issue for Alaska and for the municipality ultimately. So we're paying close attention to that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just real briefly, we're definitely in a defense position, so that's why I bring these things up. And some of them are not, again, direct nexus to our budget, but they do definitely affect our community. And I think the message that we've also carried at the state level that might be helpful is when these safety nets don't work, or when there are not options like treatment or these other things that are helping folks, as you know, on the margins, then all of that falls to our first responders. And that's going to be true for every city in America. So I think that's the other thing to say, is that it increases public safety costs. It takes cops away from working on crime. And at some point it could overwhelm our systems. And so that's really the message to carry for the local government. Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, so any final comments from BlankRome?
This is Don Norton.
Go ahead.
Don Norton of BlankRome. I don't have any final comments other than thank you for letting us do the presentation by telephone. It's a pretty busy time here in DC, and stay tuned. And we hope to see you in August in person for our next presentation.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and adjourn this work session. We'll be back at 11:40. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Hey, thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.